what I do, oh, here we are, climate alarmism and population control. And by population control, I don't mean birth control, okay? So climate alarmism is what I fight. And half the time I'm fighting that side, I'm having to fight my side that resist it, that also give a lot of misinformation. So it's 50% of my time fighting my side, giving misinformation. Climate models are not, and that's what the whole of climate alarmism is based on, are climate models. They are not evidence. They are opinions. Now, this graph here shows 102 of the climate models. And you can see all the squiggly lines up there. They're all the different opinions of climate models. The green line is the observed temperatures from satellite, backed up, by the way, by balloons. But so they're actually, the climate models are 3 times the rate of temperature increase at the moment than the temperature. And they all start at the nice cold point, by the way, of 1979, at the end of the Ice Age scare. There's a reason for that. I'm really going to have to skip through this because, there we go. Oh, I don't know what's happened. All I did was press the button. Right, this is what I rely everything on. It's what this Professor Richard Feynman said. It doesn't matter how beautiful your theory is, and it doesn't matter how smart you are. If it doesn't agree with the experiment, that's with the real world, it's wrong. It's as simple as that. And those models don't agree, but they are consistent. They are consistently wrong. And every single prediction made by them, from polar bears, sinking islands, you name it, every one has turned out wrong. Every time I press the button, it goes off. These, I have to go back. This is a temperature graph, again, since 79. That's intentionally chosen by the alarmists, by the way. But you can see it's cycles. There's lots of cycles there. And there are many, many cycles in the natural variation in temperatures. I'm going to now bring up just some of them. These are, that's one, 9.1 years, 11 years, 22 years, going right the way up to 141,000 years. Because I've been cut short, I haven't got time to discuss them, just believe me, lots of cycles. But there are other cycles, and these actually matter more. We can't feel the effect of a 100,000-year cycle, but we can feel the effect of the ocean cycles. And most of Earth is oceans, don't forget. The oceans contain 50 times the CO2 of the atmosphere, and they also contain much more heat than the atmosphere. Some ocean currents take 1,000 years to go once round. So these, the El Ninos, the La Ninas, and those, but the Atlantic multi-decadal oscillation and the Pacific, they really matter. Now I'm going to predict something. I'm going to put my faith. We are now entering a cooling period. So between now and 2035, if you go on the analysis of cycles, and it's already started, by the way, we are coming into a cooling period. It's going to cause a problem, but they'll no doubt blame climate change, global warming, on it. Now, actually, there's another thing which is quite interesting. I haven't got time to go into it now. But when the sun is weak, it allows cosmic rays to come in, from supernova, that is, and the cosmic rays vary, but they come in and they actually seed the clouds. And so there's a lot of work going on in this, and it's showing a very clear correlation between cold spells, really cold spells, and that. So even though the sun doesn't vary a tremendous amount in its 11-year cycle, it actually does have an amplification problem or issue because of clouds. No time to go into it. What I want to get across to everyone is how my side goes wrong. And I want to make it very clear. This is the heart of the deception, the CO2 myth. And this is a video of that CO2 molecule. It stretches and twists in 4 modes. So that molecule twists and stretches like that in 4 modes. It's a superb greenhouse gas. It really is. Even at very low levels, it's superb. So let's not deny that, and that's often my side get that's wrong because it's small. No, it's superb. And because of that, why doesn't it bother me? I want more CO2, by the way, and I'm going to get it, by the way, you'll see that. But why doesn't it bother me that if it's so good, surely more of it will lead to more heating? No, it doesn't. This paper, I've just put that up as the reference. That's the paper I'm basing that. I try to give references for all the work I do. On my website, I've got over 90 videos now discussing all aspects, and I keep producing them to fight the alarmism. This looks complicated, but it's dead simple, so let's not get confused here. The blue outer curve is what the Earth would radiate in the infrared band. That's how it sends the heat back into space. All the squiggly lines below it, the gap between that blue line and the squiggly lines is caused by the greenhouse gases. So we don't get, and you look at that CO2 one in the middle there with the green bit above it, right? If you look at that, that's where the CO2 grabs, but it only grabs between 14 and it only grabs in a very narrow range, a very narrow range. So, and that's the part it grabs. The blue is the CO2 grabbing that marvelous, terrific greenhouse gas, that without that we'd be a very cold Earth, believe me. We'd have a very hard time. So greenhouse CO2 is great because it's a base for keeping us warm. But that's what it does. So why doesn't adding more of that CO2 to the planet warm us more? Well, it does warm us more, but very little. And there's a thing called climate sensitivity, which is if you double the CO2, which now is about 420 parts per million, if you double it, how much extra heat will you get? And by the way, the alarmists agree with what I'm saying at the moment. Now, this next bit that's again H2O, water vapor, is the biggest greenhouse gas of all. That's by far the biggest. You can see the green bit there, that's the CO2 bit, the blue bit is the water vapor. But this is the issue for CO2. Along the bottom, we've got every 20 parts per million of CO2 being added, and up the side, its effect on temperature. You don't have to look at the units, really. So the first tiny bit of CO2 has a tremendous effect, but the next 20 has less and less and less effect. It's a bit like painting your wall, a white wall, red. You paint it red, it's red. You paint it red again, it's redder, but after 3 or 4 coats, no matter how much you put on it, it ain't going to get redder. And what's happened in that diagram is it's grabbed all of the energy that's available to it. There's no more radiation for it. And the only way to increase it a lot is to increase the sun, which we don't control. So here, at 180 parts per million, was what it got down to in the last glaciation. Cold water absorbs CO2. So it got down to that. At 150, life on Earth ceases to exist. So that's how close we came for life on Earth ceasing to exist. And by that, there may be a few microbes in the sea would survive. All animals, everything would be dead. And it got down to 180, because since the Cambrian period, at between 5,000 and 7,000 parts per million, when life blossomed, by the way, absolutely blossomed, all we've done, life has buried it. Marble, limestone, coral, everything, it's buried the CO2. And occasionally we get the glaciations, they suck it out the atmosphere and almost killed off all life. The pre-industrial level is around about 280, 284 parts per million. So now this is a graph. Now, when you double CO2, you now get, instead of the black line there, you just get a tiny bit of extra grabbing by the widening of it according to that red around it. That's all you get from a doubling. Now, what the alarmists say, the difference now between me and the alarmists, I'll point it out, is they say, yes, but your warming of CO2 causes a sort of snowball effect, because now you've heated the planet with it, right? And because you've heated the planet a little bit, it's going to increase water vapor, and that water vapor is going to make it hotter. Well, on that basis, every single bit of heating, like an El Nino, would cause the same effect. It's absolute nonsense, and that's where I depart from the alarmists. Because all this is basic radiation work. It's basic to the whole thing. Right, I'm just seeing what time I've got. Fine. So, try again.
Now, here is
right, this one, well, I'll have to go back. Right, why I believe in this work is on the right, you've got the observed. On the top, you've got the Sahara, then the Mediterranean, and the Antarctic. And the observed by satellites on the right. So this work by William Happer is actually checked out in actual observation. And the interesting thing is that bottom graph, which is the graph. On the bottom graph, it actually, the dotted line, the red dotted line, is it's the maximum you can have. But in Antarctica, it's gone higher. In Antarctica, it's gone, and it's measured this, so we know it's right, it's higher. And the funny part is this: adding CO2 to the planet, up to that limit, of course, has added heat to Antarctica. It warms the Antarctic. Sorry, it cools the Antarctic. It radiates more heat to space. And it does it because of the Antarctic inversion. As you go up in this huge continent, up in the air, it gets warmer. Unlike anywhere else on Earth, which gets colder, here it gets warmer. And that causes the effect of this greenhouse gases to give out more to space. And that's why NASA agree for the last 4 decades, and so do German observations from their stations agree, for the last 4 decades, Antarctica has been cooling at 1 degree centigrade a decade. Right. So, I don't know what happens between these. There we are. There, by the way, now one of the benefits of CO2 is obviously it's plant food. So all our crops are really growing fast. This is rice. I've maybe missed a few out there. That's corn. And by the way, Romania is doing quite well on corn there. All the crops in the world are growing. But the actual land use is not. So we're actually increasing production, and we're increasing production of food in the world by more than the population. It's actually going up faster than the population. Don't believe the scare stories. I get my data, world of data, anyone can go to it on the web. Now, and that's rice, by the way, the same. Now, the trouble with crops is they actually, most of them, most not all, but most of them, and the ones I've shown you, for example, they all evolved in higher levels of CO2. So they're in a CO2 drought. And they've got stomata, little holes in their leaves, and they breathe in the CO2, but because they're starving, they had to have lots of them. And that stomata in the leaves is something that we can actually measure going back in time and get the levels of CO2. This graph is really interesting. It's from this is from Tony Heller, and it's plotted on the CO2 graph, which everyone agrees to. We measure it in Mauna Loa in Hawaii. And the CO2 now, there's all the conferences plotted on it. Now, someone somewhere said that it's rather stupid to keep repeating the same thing and expecting a different result. But the COP meetings do it all the time, don't they? They make no difference at all to the outcome. So I'm going to have my way. China's now burning more coal now than any time in the past, right? And they've just announced huge increases. India's just announced a 60% boost, and China's announced another boost. So nothing we're doing changes the CO2. They are crippling Western economies, and it's to no effect whatsoever. And there's no way out of that. Now, but they also deceive, so I'm going to quickly whip through the deceptions. Right, I'm going to play a graph now. I'm going to play a little movie from Tony Heller. That's how the temperatures used to be. They used to be hot in the US in the 1930s, the Dust Bowl. Then it used to cool down. And when it cooled down to 1979, see the 1980 there? That was the Ice Age coming scare. Then it started to warm again. What you're seeing there is a cycle, right? That is actually what happened. That all got changed. I'm going to have to miss a bit out there, but basically they've changed all the temperature data backwards. And they've actually got terrible temperature data now. On the recent survey in mostly European countries, 75% of the temperature stations have been urbanized. So they'd come into urban heat islands. They haven't changed them. And the fiddle on that is tremendous. This is a video. It should play. No sound. This is the scare we had in the UK. Heathrow, 40.2C, recorded at Heathrow.
They fiddle the temperatures. They quote temperatures like Heathrow as a record for the UK. That thermometer is on the runway. Look at this animation.
One of the
So this is what the temperature gauge was.
Would you? But that's exactly what they've done. They've taken the record temperature from this station at Heathrow, with all the jets not just taking off and landing, but also taxiing and turning so the jets go right onto it. It is unbelievable. This climate station is right in the middle of the urban heat island effect. It's in the middle, basically, of a city, and the whole area is subject to a much higher temperature than the surroundings.
They also, of course, use vehicles and everything, around that. It isn't just planes, but it's right there.
These heat waves throw out time.
I'm trying to get to the next one. Can we get to the next one? I'll press the button. In America, they try to get around this temperature problem by doing 100 stations they call the standard reference, perfectly allocated, perfectly positioned, triple redundancy, the latest technology. They ignore the data because it shows no warming, okay, since 2005. So they ignore it.
These heat waves throughout.
Okay, I'm going to go straight to the last part.
These heat waves throughout time.
I've got a 60-second video at the end.
Look,
it's going backwards, this. Well, that's
it's
forest
seen
fires.
that just about every.
Forest fires were 5 to 6 times.
It's seen that just about everyone in the
world. We need to go to
world.
the very last animation, the very last video. That's that's a record high coral. This is a temperature fiddle where I can show you
Every single
this.
solar and wind farm
It's worth playing
in the
this.
UK
And within 90
was
seconds
on how
of
many
the end.
homes it can power by up to 500%. Seeing as all you have to do is divide the power output of any wind or solar farm by the average needed for each home to get the number of homes. It's a matter of simple division, dividing one number by another. For example, Owl's Hatch Solar Farm claims
I can hurry this up. You turn the sound down, I'll hurry it up. Basically, my PM is a member of the Cabinet, he's the Chief Whip, and he won't accept the division of one number by another, and that division of one number by another, by the way, exposes that every single wind and solar farm in the UK, his name's Simon Hart, MP, every single wind and solar farm lies about how many homes it can supply. They'll say 10,000 homes, but what they mean is 10,000 homes supply, providing 80% of the energy is coming from gas. And that needs exposing. And that's the man there. That's the man there. And I'm trying to get a television spot on this scan, right? But I've got one thing to go, which is a video, and then I need to speak.
I can't
This
help
is it.
feeling
This is how I explain the control.
the globalists, the WEF, the UN, the IPCC are now joining the crowd. The World Health Organization are trying to control the population and treat us like sheep. They are the shepherds. Dogs are 15-minute cities, climate scares, no internal combustion engine
all the
cars,
dogs.
reduce food supply, restrict travel, ration energy, digital currency and lockdowns. These controls and more are being used to herd populations, all based on a lie about CO2.
So that's the easiest way to explain how they're doing population control. Thank you very much.